Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Cheeseman Podcast. This is Brendan, your host of the show. Sadly, I'm not Caller. I'm much better looking, clearly. Caller has actually been struck down with COVID, so big shout out to Caller from everyone at the Cheese Room. We know you're pulling through, and we look forward to having you back on soon. We have a very special guest with us today. First, a quick whip around the room to see the regulars. Shan, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Just spent my evening singing along to Coco Melon with my nephew, which has obviously been great fun. I'm hoping my voice pulls through for the whole thing, but yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, good to have you back. HG, how are things?
I just sat and watched the latest episode of Ted Lasso, so I need normalcy because it was pretty weird. But yeah, life's good. I mean, I'm in Austria. Life is always good when I'm here.
And Seb, with your massive earphones, how you doing, mate?
I'm good. Yeah. I did warn you. I did say I'm going to have massive earphones. But yeah, I'm actually missing Married at First Sight. That's how important it is to me. So,
no.
Yeah, I've been glued to it for a couple of weeks now. It's a big night tonight, and I'm actually going to miss it. So,
I thankfully have no idea what that program is. And we're obviously delighted. We have a very special guest with us, South American football expert, the correspondent for BBC, ESPN. He's on TalkSport. He is the voice for South American football. He's my brother, Miriam Tim Vickery. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm glad that everything is wells in the life of HG. Oh, that's a terrible pun. I was going to match you, Bren, and put on I've got a Tottenham polo shirt, but in the end, I went with this, which is, I get away with this better at my age. But it's a shirt that was partly designed by Paolo Hewitt, Tottenham fan, who I don't know if you've had him on. I know he does Tottenham podcasts. So anyway, it's a little bit of it's kind of blue with white dots. Okay. So it's there. I think it's in the spirit.
Have you seen the new kits, Tim? The away kit and the third kit?
Yeah, I like the first. I like the home kit. I like the first one. It's streamlined and I like that. The other ones, they're a bit garish, aren't they? But we've all been there. I've got a purple garish second strip from around '96.
Okay. With the stripes. Is that the one with the stripes? No, okay.
No, it's kind of Ginola era. I wasn't around then,
pony.
But someone was going. That's it. Yeah, pony. It is a little bit pony, but I still get away with it.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tim. We've got a lot to get through. We do have to talk about the Chelsea game, but we'll get through it quickly as possible and try and find some positives from the game yesterday, certainly in terms of the first half performance. I'll start with you, Tim, because it's great to have you back. So the lineup yesterday, we saw our South American contingent come back after their isolation sort of training in Croatia. It could have been a jolly. We don't know. There were no photos to sort of see what was going on there. But Romero and Royale obviously wasn't part of that contingent. But what were you happy when you saw that lineup? Do you think that Romero is the defender that we hope he'll be?
For me, the jury's still out, and I think he's the best centre back that Argentina have come up with in a long while. But that's a little bit like being the world's tallest dwarf. I'm not 100% convinced, and he's done a lot for Argentina, and he's only been in international since June, and within about 20 minutes, he became the first centre back on the team sheet when he's not suspended. But the other centre back is Otamendi, which kind of shows you where Argentina are. It's a problem position for him. I still worry a little bit about him, especially kind of 1-against-1 situations. He had a couple yesterday when I thought he was selling himself. And it's a very, very tough game to judge players who are in their first or some of their first matches, especially defenders, because defending is a collective thing, isn't it? You need to have a kind of common denominator in that defensive unit. And obviously he hasn't been there for long enough to really form that. And they're up against a very good side, the champions of Europe, who are better than they were when they won that title just a few months back. So it was a tough one, and on him personally, I'm still not convinced. I'm kind of quietly optimistic, but I do worry a little bit that how he can sell himself. And we saw it right from the kickoff, when Chelsea were through within the first 15 seconds, and they got into the space behind him. So for me, they spent a lot of money on him, and because of his age, that's possibly sound business. But I'm still yet to be entirely convinced. I didn't see a lot of him in Italy with Atalanta, where in a very front foot attacking side, he seems to have done extremely well. So I haven't seen enough of him in that context. So someone who's been watching Italian football will probably know more about him than I do. But from my point of view, I'm still not 100% convinced.
Yeah. Well, HG, it was quite an attacking lineup. We were relatively happy to sort of see the trio in midfield that we had. We had Højbjerg, Lo Celso, and Ndombele in there. So
Højbjerg. I've always wondered how you say it. Højbjerg.
I think it's Højbjerg. Yeah, HG, you're more familiar with that.
Well, you think somehow I'm the expert? I think it's Højbjerg. Yeah. But yeah, like Hay Mountain. I mean, that's what it means. But yes, the midfield three, like everyone, I think I've been wanting to see it for a long time. I actually saw it when they came to Linz and played in the Europa League last year, and they were awful that night, even though it was like -10 or something stupid. I was happy. Like, I want to see those three playing together. We've seen it for 18 months. We can't play through midfield, and those three kind of can if they complement each other enough to do that. So I was excited to see it. Obviously, having Son back was a massive boost because I don't think anyone expected that. And then you just think, okay, well, Dele, where does he fit in? He was almost the odd one out to me. But the three central midfielders plus Son, I was happy. That's the side I want to see Spurs play. I'd much rather us try and actually keep the ball and pass it to each other than just lump it and hope that someone with any pace can get on the end of it.
Well, Shan, you were at the game. First half looked good. We were pressing. It was we were saying it was probably the best 45 minutes so far this season. We still ended up getting tagged 3-0. But do you think Nuno got his tactics right from the off?
I mean, it was a bit of a strange one because obviously I was in the north stand right behind the goal, so I pretty much saw everything. So I saw the best of Spurs and the very worst of Spurs all in one close space. So yeah, I think tactically to begin with, he got it spot on. But then obviously Tuchel showing how tactically brilliant he is. Obviously bringing on Kante is going to help any team. But he brought in Kante and adjusted tactically, and Nuno just couldn't match it. We didn't have enough depth on the bench to do anything. And then he took off the two players that can control the ball. So then you lose all of your ball retention in midfield, and we got absolutely spanked in that second half. It was honestly my eyes were burning. The second goal went in I honestly feel like it went in slow motion. Had a little boy sat next to me, and we were like, "Ooh, and then it went in and we're like, oh, it took about 5 seconds for that ball to go in. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen us play so well and so poorly, and I probably have at Spurs, but so well and so poorly in one game. It was like, what? But even when we looked good, we didn't look like we had any end product, and that is what's really concerning me this season. 1 goal from open play in 5 games. That is disgusting.
Yeah. Hopefully the eye burning had nothing to do with the vegan menu at the game yesterday. The world's first carbon neutral game. Seb, you were there as well.
Yeah.
How was it for you? I guess we want to try and wrap up the Chelsea thing as much as possible. Was it simply that they have a better 11, a better manager, and a better bench? And like Shan said, if you're able to bring on N'Golo Kante at half-time, the world's best defensive midfield driver, can we really be surprised at the result?
Perhaps not. I would suggest that the result isn't everything. I kind of fully expected to lose. Chelsea have a better squad than us, a better team than us, a better bench than us, a better manager than us, a better run than us. So you expect probably to lose that game. What disappointed me was it actually wasn't the first 15 minutes of the second half where we went 2-0 down. It was the half an hour after that where I just thought there was a complete lack of application. And I include the manager in that. The changes, as Shan said, I thought were wrong. And there were players jogging, not even jogging. There were players walking around on the pitch. It got quite toxic where I was. I was 9 rows from the front in the south stand. And there were players being called out, particularly Harry Kane. I think you've probably seen the article that I've written today. I thought he was appalling. I was really, really disheartened by 2 or 3 of the players who I thought just didn't look bothered. And that gets me more than the result. I fully expected to lose. If we'd have got anything out of the game, I would have been delighted. I fully expected to lose. It's the manner of it that I didn't like. And as Shan said as well, just, okay, we might have been slightly on top the first half. There's nothing really to get excited about. Not really. Reggie broke through and ballsed it up. I can't remember. Son had a toe poke at the keeper. I can't remember a lot more that really got everyone out of their seats. Well, I say out of their seats, I was standing all game, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I don't want to focus too much on Chelsea, but Thiago Silva did score their first goal. And I don't know if I mentioned to you, the others are going to hate me for this. When I left Brazil, I was in the UK for 3 months to see my dad after he had his vaccine and to get my own jabs. And I did my quarantine in Lisbon, so I didn't have to do it in the hotels by Heathrow. And whilst there, met up with a good friend, Sandro. And
you never said.
I say it all the time, Tim. So, but he said that he was really happy for Thiago Silva. The only good thing about Chelsea winning the Champions League, which had happened like the day before, a couple of days before I met with him, he said that Thiago Silva finally getting that winner's medal was that made him really happy. And he's very popular, Thiago Silva, among Brazilians, among the squad, but also Brazilians in general. What's your sort of...
Well, I mean, depends who, because many won't forgive him for 2014 when he was the worst captain in the history of football. The Chile game goes to a penalty shootout. And what's he do? He's a captain. He's a leader. He sits on his own, away from everyone, sitting on a football, crying his eyes out.
Because he was suspended.
I've never seen anything like it. The moment when you want your captain to stand up and lead. And then the next game, Colombia, he stupidly got himself suspended. Stopping Ospina kicking the ball out. That's why he picked up his yellow card that kept him out of the semi-final. So there are a lot of Brazilians who hold that against him. He's a warrior, and he was saying before that World Cup that he was having sleepless nights about it, which is not what you want to hear from your captain, when you're going in. So, but he has been a magnificent defender, and I remember I followed him from when he went to Europe, but it didn't work out. He had TB in Russia, and came back to Brazil and restarted with Fluminense, and it was very, very special. He was very quick as well, and now obviously he's lost a little bit of that pace. And as Shan was saying, Tuchel, I think Tuchel is a phenomenon, and he's worked out how to play him, which is in the middle of a 3, where he doesn't have to cover as much of the space as he was done a couple of times yesterday. And the big one, and Seb mentioned it, when Reggie got in. Now, I think it was Kane who turned Thiago Silva on the halfway line and then plays the ball into space, and Reguilón is there, and Thiago Silva can't get back. And it's one of the 2 dangerous moments. The ball is squared and we got a chance. But what saves Thiago Silva, and it's happened 2 or 3 times in a game, is the pace of Rudiger. The defensive pace of Rudiger allows Thiago Silva to get by. In terms of the goal, I mean, the 2 goals annoyed me. They came out second half, and it was a fantastic substitution in it, because I'm sure that most people, when they saw Kante coming on, thought it was going to be Kovacic who went off. No, it's Mason. He's taken off Mason Mount. I was watching it on Brazilian TV, and they were saying, this is clearly a defensive move, to take off Mason Mount and bring on Kante. But it wasn't, was it? It meant that with the 3 there, with Jorginho, Kante and Kovacic, they just had a stranglehold on us, didn't they? They kept us right back and really piled on the pressure. But the 2 goals are really irritating, aren't they? I mean, the first one, Dele Alli just hasn't. Dele Alli, there was twice on corners where he looks like he's the one who's picking up Thiago Silva, and he he doesn't. It's such a soft goal to concede, and then the second one is really, really cruel. As you mentioned, it's like 5 minutes to go in, but you got to close. You got to close them down when they're in shooting range. You got to get a little bit closer, and then we're 2-0 down. And then after that, as you said, there's just the team have absolutely no hope. They can't imagine themselves getting back into the game.
Yeah.
I wonder, you're talking about the midfield. My thoughts of looking at it was that I would have liked to have seen Lo Celso play a little bit deeper and Dele Alli play higher.
Yeah.
I didn't understand because what does Dele Alli do best? It's those runs off the centre forward that he used to do under in the Pochettino thing. That's what he's best at. And Lo Celso is, the best thing about Argentina, who have been unbeaten now for more than 2 years, the best thing about the team is the partnership between Lo Celso and Messi. And it really works, and he finds him all the time. And I think Lo Celso would be better building the play from deeper. And I think HG was saying about we don't play through midfield well enough. And to play that high up the field as he was, and he did play one lovely little ball in for Son, that moment where Son's one-on-one with the goalkeeper. But to play that high up the field as he was, I don't think Lo Celso's quite quick enough for that. Further deep, where he's got that range of passing and it's easier for him to get the ball on his left foot, I think then he can build from deep and then he can make the ball fly. So that was my complaint when I looked at the way that the side was lined up. I think we'd have been better off with Lo Celso deeper and Dele running off the centre forward.
Do you know what I always think is interesting is that when Lo Celso does play for Spurs, he often kind of drifts in from the right-hand side, not only as a right winger kind of position, but also in midfield. We seem to have this idea where Ndombele, who's right-footed, would be on the left of the two, and Lo Celso, and I've never really understood it. Like, I get inverted wingers because then, okay, you leave space for the fullbacks to bomb forward, but in midfield, it just seems to clog everything up. And so, like, I feel like the midfielders that we had, they were all capable of doing something, but at some point you need to say, no, you are best at this. Dele, you are best in an attacking area. Højbjerg, we need you to sit because the others do it. Ndombele, we want you to... It's almost problematic because he's the best at finding the ball forward, but he's also the best at receiving it under pressure. So there has to be a way where you can get those people functioning as a unit. We'd love to have those talents in just two players, but it's not happening. So let's use the three more wisely. And I mean, Dele has always been the goal scorer for Spurs. I've never understood why they want to see him as a box-to-box midfielder or even deeper. His passing's not great, but his runs off the ball, his runs between centre-backs, that's where he made his name for Spurs. And yeah, we had the ball. We were playing higher up the pitch. We were able to press teams and make it difficult for them to play around us. But when Dele's in that area, him and Kane had a partnership to me. The two of them worked really well together, and we don't see that anymore. Or if we do, it's in our own half. It's frustrating.
And isn't that exactly what Tuchel has done with Chelsea? He's worked out... people 2 years ago were saying that Jorginho can't play in the Premier League. And he's worked out a way to bring out the virtues of Jorginho. People were saying 2 years ago that Kante only sat, he only defended. And now he's driving at you. He's using that dynamism to force back. Thiago Silva, he's passed it. No. Put him along with Rudiger. And Lampard wouldn't pick Rudiger. Incredible as it seems now. So, the simple art of bringing out the best of what you've got. And I think we're much better than we showed, certainly in the second half yesterday. There are players there that if they can knit together are better than the collective performance that we saw yesterday.
Mm. Well, on that, we've got a question here from the caller who would be hosting if it weren't for COVID. He's asking you, Tim, what are your thoughts on Harry Kane in terms of his desire to play for Spurs? And I guess in general, like when a player wants to leave, what do you do in that situation? Do we held on to him, but in doing so, are we better off? Or should we have cashed in and let a player that doesn't want to be here go and get players in that do?
I come here tonight in a spirit of wanting to learn, really, because I'm a long way away. And the last time that I was at a game, was December of 17. I haven't seen the new stadium, so I'm still a kind of widow of Pochettino. So I'm going to ping that one back to you, especially Shan and Seb who are in the stadium, because that's the place to see the game, isn't it? If you're in the stadium, you're seeing the movement that's going on when the ball's not close. You're seeing the commitment of the player. So I'll ping that one back to you. What do you think? Do you think the club should have cashed in?
Should I go?
It's a really tough one, isn't it? Because I think it was always going to be 50-50. I think he's obviously one of our best players, so the club wanted to keep hold of him for that reason. But then at the same time, if you've got the talent, but if you don't want to use it, then you're just a passenger. And I think a lot of us have been hoping that he'd find his form. He generally starts pretty slow, and that he was just building up fitness as he was late back. But I think yesterday's game, he was invisible. You had Reggie and Son. We were relying on so many balls over the top to Son. You had Reggie charging forward. Where's Kane? He's nowhere to be seen. He's dropping deep, but then he's not really doing anything in the middle either. His passes were sloppy. He just doesn't seem at it for me, and it's strange because for England, even though he wasn't playing particularly well, he was still getting the ball and scoring. But for Spurs, he just doesn't seem to be interested in being in any of the correct positions. It's so sad to see. And like Seb said, it was Harry Kane is getting a lot of blame where I was as well. He just don't look at it, and I'm starting to think would we be better off once Lucas and Bergwijn are fit, dropping him and just playing Lucas, Bergwijn and Sonny up top.
Seb?
Yeah, I have huge concerns over Harry Kane, as I wrote in my piece today. And it's not just the kind of should we have sold him issue. It's actually, for me, now this has been going on, probably getting on for a year. And it's the kind of dropping deep, almost wanting to be Pirlo that, I get it. I get the assists, got the assist as well as the Golden Boot crown last season. I understand that he's good at it. I've come on the pod before and said he's probably our best midfielder. When he's pinging balls through and stuff, but he needs to remember that he's a striker. He's got the number 10 on his back. And on a day yesterday, I think it was felt more with the Jimmy Greaves tribute that happened before the game. And we all know that Kane has said before that he'd love to break Greaves' record and he'd love to be seen in that light. Well, he's kind of stopped going about it the right way, both in terms of mentality and positionally. What I worry about with Harry Kane is that he has become, whether it's his fault or the club's fault, almost bigger than the team. And that a manager, and we saw it with Pochettino, and as we go back to the Champions League final and things like that, is almost unable to tell Harry Kane how to play. Harry Kane will play where Harry Kane wants. If he's fit, he plays. And it's kind of woe betide anyone who gets in the way, whether it's in a striking position. And now he seems to believe that he's a central midfielder. There was a lot of analysis done overnight and this morning on his positioning, and it's just it hampers, in my mind, the whole team. He's dropping deeper than Ndombele and Lo Celso. When Tim's talking about Lo Celso and he wished he'd played deeper, there was no room to, because Harry Kane's in that position. So even if Lo Celso had played deeper, he'd be standing next to Harry Kane, looking forward and seeing that there's no one there to pass the ball to. It scuppers the shape of the whole team. I think he needs dropping for a few weeks. That's what I would do. And I do think, as Shan said, that the brightest we've looked this season was for about 45 to 60 minutes against Manchester City, where Son, Bergwijn and Lucas dragged Man City's central defenders deep and wide. Ake, I think it was, I've forgotten who the other central defender was for City, but they were panicked. They didn't know whether to follow or stay still. We don't have that. I know Tim said about Thiago Silva and how impressive his performance was yesterday, and it was. They're drilled to within an inch of their life, the Chelsea defenders. But But in terms of handling Kane, they didn't have anything to do. It's easy.
I'm going to be devil's advocate now, all right? Because had you said at the start of the season or at the start of the summer, okay, we can sell Harry Kane to the champions of England and they'll offer, 60 cents on the dollar. They won't pay what he's worth. They won't pay anywhere near what he's worth. And now we're sitting here at the end of the summer thinking, yeah, we probably should have done that. No, we shouldn't have done that.
I've never said... No.
I'm not saying you. I'm not saying you said that. But the idea that like Kane is somehow a problem. No, I don't think we should have sold him and reinvested it. I will never think that. The guy has been the best striker we've seen since Greaves, and you don't just give them away to a team that you're playing against. So I've said that all summer, and I stay with it. As for Kane and what he's done, like Spurs fans have always said, "Oh, we miss Eriksen. We miss that creative midfielder." And clearly, I think Mourinho, when he was in charge, said, "Right, well, look, we don't have that player because Eriksen's now gone." But I do have some speedsters like Lucas or Son, and I'll use Kane to drop back and play that role. And we saw it worked for that, that run where we were, I think this time last year, we won a run of 7 or 8 wins in a row or something like that. And we were top going into the Christmas period. And we had that game at Anfield, and Bergwijn had those chances that he could have scored and didn't. And it all kind of fell from there. But that became Kane's role. And so under Mourinho, I think he was asked to do that. And I think actually yesterday he was probably asked to do that by Nuno as well. I don't particularly agree with it. I think we would have been better off with Son on one side. But fair enough if that's what he was chosen. The issue then is Kane doing it more than what he's being asked to do? Is he trying to find the ball? Is he trying to influence games and coming deeper when you're right, Seb? We don't really want that from him. Not when we've got 3 central midfielders behind who can all pass the ball. Lo Celso has that ability. Ndombele certainly does, but you need players up front making those runs. And if Son is the only one, then it's very easy for 3 centre-backs to deal with it. So I think that with Kane, yes, we have an issue, as in when we're forced to play deep, then we can't have him. We can't have him come deep. It makes no sense. But if we are hopefully at some point going to see a game where we have the ball and we are able to push on other teams, then you want Kane in that centre forward position. And I just feel that the Man City game is a perfect example. Kane wasn't there, so we had 3 attackers who were looking to go forward, who were looking to use their pace, that were going to worry Manchester City. We didn't have that yesterday, and it made it more difficult for everyone, not just Kane, but for anyone in that team to really hurt the opponents. First half, we were better because we could keep the ball in midfield, but as soon as they went off, we weren't able to play football. It was left to let's hit it into the channels like we're 1980s Cambridge. That's awful, but I just think that Kane, for whatever reason, we need to just decide, right, this is how we're going to play. This is what we want from you, just as Mourinho did last year, and we'll go as a team with that. I think Nuno's been very clear about wanting, getting everyone on board and believing in what he's trying to do. Kane is a fantastic striker who needs to be close to goal, and we have the players that like to play on the front foot. We've got even the centre-back Romero, as Tim said, wants to play on the front foot. He did that for Atalanta last year. He wants to get in early and nick the ball, and we want to play with a press. And so we just need to do that. And when we do that, then Kane, as a focal point, can be on the end of things. And I think that would help Spurs completely.
I think I think we got stuck on the positional issue, because the other issue yesterday was 100%, and where Shan said as well that the fans were talking, it was a lack of effort. It wasn't just his positional play was wrong, which it was completely wrong. There was a time where he got really, really kind of shellacked in the crowd, was just a simple ball forward. He was standing on the halfway line. He went for a header and Jorginho beat him, and he didn't even get his feet off the ground. And it's things like that where you're kind of wondering what is going on in your head. It was, I think that was about 65, 70 minutes. So, try and get one back, try and get in the game. But the whole team didn't look like as soon as one went in, I didn't see much at all. And the reason, I guess it is we don't create enough. So if you're on the pitch, you would have that subconscious thought of, we're 1-0 down, we don't score more than one. The absolute best we're going to get out of this is a draw, and we have to play out of our skins to get it. There's no way we're winning the game. And as soon as the second one goes in, that was game over. The whole crowd knew it. The players knew it. The manager knew it. Game over.
And then taking off Dombele and Lo Celso just made it even worse.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, I almost like I want to think that if you're being paid all this money, then you're going to keep running no matter what. But I don't think the fans keep cheering no matter what. So to me, it's a relatively normal response to be like, well, this is a waste of my Sunday. It's awful. You don't want your professional players.
Even
yeah, absolutely. Why should they be any different? Just because they earn lots of money? I've never understood this. Like, yes, we would love to have 11 Roy Keanes, but no team has that. When you're 2-0 down against the European champions, I think it's relatively normal to be like, oh, this is going to be a long afternoon. And then the two players who had given us the chance to actually work the ball and keep the ball were taken off. So to me, like, yeah, don't get me wrong, I don't want to see players do that, but I do think it's pretty understandable that when you think, what's the point? We've got a game on Wednesday, we've got a game next week that's suddenly very important. Why? I don't know. Like, I don't want it, but I do think it's understandable.
Well,
I
just
think another issue as well is. Sorry, I think another issue as well is Kane seems to have lost another couple of yards of pace.
Yes,
so
Shan.
when he's dropping deep, he hasn't got the pace to get forward quick enough. He needs to either drop deeper, and we need to get another striker to play in his position. So he needs to play as a number 10, or he needs to stay further up the pitch because he hasn't got the pace to do both anymore, and it's crippling us.
One thing on Kane as well I noticed was we rushed him back, or he rushed himself back way too quickly from that injury against Everton. Richarlison's significantly sized arse rolled over his ankle. It was at a right angle. That's 8 weeks minimum to heal back, and he rushed himself back in 2 weeks to play in the final. Played awful. We played awful. We didn't deserve anything from that game. It goes back to the power that he has. It's like, well, I'm playing no matter what. I'll play how I want. I'll play, and yeah, it's just a concern for me there as well. That since that injury, he's not looked the same. He had a poor Euros by his standards. You're talking about his pace as well. He never was blessed with a huge amount of pace, but he did have some, And it was just a worry that injury doesn't look like it was properly dealt with. Tim, what are your thoughts on Nuno? I remember when we had you on last time that you weren't a huge fan of Jose Mourinho, and I think your words were that football's a dynamic process and Mourinho didn't change with the times. But what are your thoughts on Nuno? Maybe not so far as a Spurs manager, but in general as a manager, was he a good choice?
Well, I've got a lot of admiration for Mourinho, but and his record speaks for itself. But there were two worries when he came to Tottenham. One is that time had passed him by. And the other is that, even if it hadn't passed him by, he ain't me, babe. He's not us. And I feel a little bit like, all right, they've had a look at one dose of sour-tempered Portuguese pragmatism. Let's have some more. So I was surprised when Nuno came in. Wouldn't have been my. It's not what I see as the club. No, it's sour-minded Portuguese pragmatism isn't us. I can cope with losing, but I can't cope with just being dull and being mediocre. To dare is to do.
Yeah. HG, one description of Nuno that I like is that he looks a bit like a dying Jedi, like sort of with just without the robes. Like I don't know. When he joined, it was a surprise that we went through 7 different managers to get to him, but we kind of accepted it. We kind of went, well, he was so popular at Wolves. The players were gutted when he left. The fans were gutted when he left. So he clearly isn't as sort of old-fashioned as Mourinho. Clearly does understand players' mindsets, modern players' mindsets, but it's just not worked yet so far. Do we just need to give him time and allow him to progress, and hopefully the football will improve?
Well, yes. I mean, it's been 5 league games? Like, it's way too early. I mean, I wrote a piece on the Facebook group about how Pochettino was in charge for 2 seasons before we started getting really good, and that half of those players were at the club before he even arrived. So these players had played together for 3 or 4 seasons, like Vertonghen and Dembele. They'd been at the club a while before Pochettino showed up. Like, Nuno may not become as good as Pochettino, but after 5 games, you can't decide anything based on that. He's had to deal with Kane and that situation. He's had to deal with Dombele and that situation. He's had to deal with the South Americans and that situation. And frankly, that's half of our best team. So what is he left with? He's done really well to get Dyer and Sanchez look something decent. I just think that if he continues to play with those three that we saw in midfield, and I think they are members of our best 11. So if he continues to play with that and stick with that, then I think Spurs fans will see that there's some kind of progress and there's some kind of identity coming back to the club, that we're not going to be just this kind of, sit back, defend deep and try and counter. We want to be progressive with the ball. We want to be Spurs, right? We don't want to be that team. We want to be Spurs. And I think that if he goes that way, then things will go good. I've seen people talk about how if we lose against Arsenal, then he's really on the hot seat. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, what? It's a terrible way to run the club. Yeah, like I don't want us to lose against Arsenal, but we tend to when we play at their ground. We don't win there very often. So the idea that somehow losing next week will make everything terrible, and I don't get it. I don't see it. So Nuno, to me, deserves at least the season, right? I mean, David Moyes got almost a season at Man United, and he only got sacked because they were no longer possible to make the Champions League. I think Nuno will get that season, and I think he deserves it. We have to have some kind of identity again, and I hope it's going to be a positive one and not a counter-attacking one. I think if we continue to play counter-attacking against, let's say, lesser teams, then people will rightly have a go. But we've played, two of the best teams in Europe, both Champions League finalists. We beat one of them, somewhat fortunately, but we did beat one of them. So how was that not Nuno? And yet yesterday's result is suddenly all Nuno. I don't understand that logic. You've got to give him time.
Sorry, my son's just walked in to steal the charger. No, you can't have it. You can't have it. I'm using it for the light. Sorry. Tim, we got a question there for you, Tim, from David Harris. He's gone through our Brazilians there. Gilberto, Gomes, Sandro, Mora, Emerson. Why can't we recruit proper worldies from Brazil?
Well, there was a time when I hoped that your mate Sandro would be that, Yeah. And if it wasn't for injuries, I think he could have been. And I was there for his debut, which, if memory serves me right, was Arsenal in the League Cup, whatever it was called then.
Yeah. And
you were thinking, yes, it was a bad night. We got hammered, but yes. Yes, he seemed to have the whole lot. And I had a word with him afterwards, and he was just loving it. He was loving the atmosphere in the stadiums, and he was loving the dynamism of the games. And I remember meeting some of the people at Tottenham, press officers and so on, and they were saying he's like the life and soul of everything. And you're thinking at that point, because at that point he's on the fringe of the Brazil squad. And you're thinking he's going to be their central midfielder, and if it wasn't for the injuries, I think he could have been a genuine world-class central midfielder. Some of the other ones have been unlucky. And Gilberto, I never really understood why Gilberto didn't come off. He was a good left back and had a pretty good track record. I think he made a big mistake in a high-profile game, and never really settled. Gomez was always Gomez, wasn't he? And he was capable of making unbelievable saves and then throwing one into his own net, and he did like a flap. Lucas Moura, well, he's had his moments with us, hasn't he? But I think he suffered from a vastly inflated reputation early in his career, because he was a very frustrating player. He's like playing in his own little wind tunnel, and I think we've got more out of him. It was no surprise to me when he went to Paris Saint-Germain for a fortune that he didn't come off. No surprise. I had a chat with him, and I just couldn't believe how shy he was just before he left Brazil. Yeah, and he told me he was finding it quite hard to cope with, being recognised and so on. So, he didn't have a big enough personality to live up to the transfer fee, and he just wasn't good enough. He's a straight line runner. He's added more to his game, and he's now very useful. He's never going to be a world beater, I think. Emerson, well, jury's still out on him. I think he's very, very raw, really raw. there's not much in his CV really. I mean, he was a reserve in Brazil. He played for Brazil's under-20s badly. They didn't qualify for. 4 South American teams qualified for the World Under-20s. Brazil didn't. And Brazil's under-20s have been a graveyard for the last decade. They've been terrible for the last decade. So I wouldn't necessarily hold it too much against him that he didn't come off there. He goes to Barcelona, gets loaned to Betis 2 seasons. First season, not a lot. Second season, better. But it's Betis. Brazil are telling us that he's raw because right back is a problem position for them. The 2 in the squad, Danilo, once of Man City, now at Juventus, who's good but not great, and Daniel Alves, who's 38. Daniel Alves was not fit to play the Copa America, so Emerson got called up. Nardi got on the field. He played 1 game when they put out a reserve team and 5 minutes off the bench, and then he got dropped from the squad. So Brazil are telling us he's raw.
One thing I noticed about, sorry to jump in, Emerson's upbringing was that he, as a youth player, he did the rounds. Like he played for Corinthians, I think, São Paulo, Ponte Preta in Campinas. He went to Grêmio in Porto Alegre, and these are cities that only Tim and I will know here. But like for a youth player to have done so much, is that normal in Brazil?
Yeah, well, and Cafu got turned down. He had trials all over the place and kept on getting turned down. That reflects well on him. Because if he hasn't made the grade somewhere, he's gone somewhere else, and he's kept trying. He's had a tough start, hasn't he? Because first up was Zaha. That's not easy, Then he came off the bench at Rennes, and he played attacking midfield, which he looked a bit lost there, and who can blame him? Then he's up against Chelsea and Alonso, who was one of the best players on the field, wasn't he? And he's not there yet, is he? He's not ready yet. I mean, he's not thinking quick enough. Almost every touch is an error. Almost every touch is a mispass. That's because things are happening too quickly for him. Hopefully, he will adapt. And it's obviously it's not the greatest comparison for a Tottenham fan, but there is something of Maicon in him as a big, powerful, attacking right back, which hopefully we can develop. But at the moment, he looks. Alonso managed to get in behind him a couple of times. There were a couple of times when Alonso was able to get in crosses, and Emerson was nowhere near him. You could see Eric Dyer having a yell. Get out to him and stop it coming in. So he's nowhere near yet. I fear. I hope he comes good, but it's been a difficult baptism. He will have easier games to start with than up against Zaha and up against Chelsea.
Can I just? I want to answer David's question. The reason why Spurs can't recruit proper worldies is because proper worldies don't want to go to Spurs. That's it. It's more to do with us, I think, than anything else.
Well, there was if you'll pardon the expression, we spunked some of that bail money on Eric Lamela, who honestly was seen as potential world class. I remember when it was at Roma, Brazilian guy who does Italian league saying, Lamela is a future candidate to be on the podium for World Player of the Year, and they attracted him, and he was never there, was he? He had some moments, Eric Lam, but he was never. He was one who I remember being in Buenos Aires, and he was on the front page of the sports paper, and he was 13.
Wow.
Argentine football had lost Messi, and Barcelona were going to take Lamela and his family and take him over. And River Plate, to stop that, they kind of put him on a big contract at that age and made a big fuss of him. So he grew up thinking he was the special one, and I think maybe that explains some of the attacks of petulance that he was. I always thought he was going to get sent off in every game that he played because he was always late, wasn't he? He was always late because he wasn't quite quick enough to be a genuine world-class player. But at the time that Tottenham bought him, some put him up in that category. And I haven't seen the stadium, but if I was a world-class player, I think I'd probably like to play there.
Yeah, I mean, like now, certainly. I just think that, like, when I look at Brazilians over the years, I mean, I don't follow too much football, but like they tend to go to Italy. Some have gone to Germany over the years and made their name in Germany before doing anything else. England has never been that place for Brazilians to go to Europe and make their name. And so it would be tough, like to get a proper world-class star. Well, they've already established themselves, which again, they probably wouldn't choose Spurs at that point. So it is going to be doing what we've done maybe with Emerson, or even finding someone straight from Brazil. I mean, years ago, 15 years ago, we were linked with Diego. I remember that. Yeah. And we came really, and that was like, okay, that may be the chance. And I think he went to Germany in the end, and we all know he had a decent career, or maybe even Portugal first. I just think England is not, it's not a desired place for Brazilians to go to start their European adventure.
Well, I think that's changed now. I mean, you can see the fact that 9 of the Brazil squad are Premier League based. And word got around. I remember word getting around in the 90s, in the late 90s. You know, when I first started interviewing players, it was Spain and Italy, and then it very quickly became Spain, Italy, and England, and not necessarily in that order. Word got round that Big Corn was being paid there, and you'd be amazed by the brand, by the if I can use a horrible term, the brand recognition. And when I first moved over here, you know, and I said, you know, they asked me who I support, and I said no one had even heard of them. And now, and this is going back 5 or 6 years. I was wearing my Tottenham polo shirt, and all it's got is the cockerel. It's got nothing else. And the bank security guard, and Brendan will know how low down the totem pole the bank security guard is. He recognised the top, and he knew who we were playing the next week. And the Premier League has gone. It's gone mental in Brazil. People love it, regardless of whether there's a Brazilian in the team or not. You know, so it's on the TV executives tell me it's the one they all want. All the TV companies would love to have the Premier League, and that's filtered down to the players as well. Obviously, it's hard if you're a Brazilian. It's hard to compete with Barcelona, you know, because if you go to Barcelona, you are putting yourself in the tradition, you know, of Romario, Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, and so on. You know, you are that's why Felipe Coutinho just couldn't say no, and ended up destroying his career going there. But the Premier League now has real pulling power. And with Tottenham getting to the Champions League final a couple of years ago, and the stadium, the brand awareness now over here is much, much bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah, well, very similar to me. Sorry to jump in. Like, I saw a kid wearing a fake Tottenham shirt, and so I had to go up and say hello to him and to see why he was supporting Spurs. And I saw they saw me the next day a few days or weeks later in a pizzeria, and they came up and started talking to me like Tottenham, and he wasn't wearing his Tottenham shirt at the time, and I'm like, yeah, my son was wearing the top. So it is, and I think when I first came out here, because I've been here 15 years now as well, there wasn't that much recognition. This was pre-Redknapp, pre our sort of honeymoon in the Champions League, our first run. So no one really knew who we were then. And I was sort of giving my old Tottenham jerseys to people just to sort of do my bit for the brand.
Why do you think, Tim, if I can just jump in, that we don't see, obviously particularly from Tottenham, but across the Premier League, direct buys from South America? Because I'm thinking, obviously, the contingent that we've got at the moment, if you look at Lo Celso, Lamela that we had, Lucas, Sanchez, we've got a South American contingent, but we've had to pay big bucks for these players, where, for instance, with Sanchez, obviously Ajax picked him up from Colombia. He was there not very long, and then we've paid huge amount of money. Have we got, or do English clubs have a good scouting network to be able to buy these clubs buy these players on the cheap? And why are we forking out this huge amount of money a year, 2 years after they've been in Spain or Holland or whatever?
There's one name we haven't mentioned, which is Paulinho, who afterwards had a pretty good year for Barcelona and has scored more goals for Brazil than any other central midfielder in their history. You know, so again, a player that we didn't get the best out of. I think the reason is that buying straight from South America into the Premier League, I mean, it's tough. It's a huge step up. A lot of the European clubs felt this around a decade ago, that the chasm between football over here and top-level European football just really opened up, where that chasm hadn't really existed, say, 20 years ago. There were different styles of football, but in terms of quality, the quality over here was still good. And now, sometimes it looks like a different sport. You know, the Brazilian First Division from the Premier League or top level European football. There is an interesting reaction in Brazil going on at the moment. There's kind of a handful of soup clubs, and one of the things they're doing is buying from Europe. They're bringing back veterans from Europe, or they're bringing back people from Europe who haven't quite done it, but are still good players. Like Flamengo have just signed Kennedy, who was at Chelsea, Andreas Pereira from Man United. They've also signed David Luiz. So you get the two types of players: ones in their mid-20s who haven't established themselves but still have something to offer, and ones at the end of their career who could still play at top level in Brazil anyway. So I think there's a view now that it's just too much of a gamble. That the kind of secondary scouting thing is better,
even though it costs the huge amount of money.
Yeah, because you know more about what you're getting for your money, not only as a player but also as a human being. Has this player been able to adapt to life away from home, as well as has this player been able to adapt to a quicker type of football? And the pitches here are very poor, and the pitches are slow, so that has an effect on the style of football. So there's always that question: can he adapt? And the easiest way of having some kind of answer to that question is see him come over to Europe, and then, all right, you might pay more, but at least you know a little bit more about him.
Yeah.
And also, the cupboard is pretty bare, because on the way that the market is going now, the European clubs will buy the sensations at 18.
Yeah,
so the ones who are if you're like 22 and you haven't gone, why
too
not?
late.
Yeah, too late. Yeah.
Well, Tim, you've been doing the rounds recently after the fiasco in Sao Paulo when the three Argentinian players that played in the Premier League were dragged off the pitch by federal police and Anvisa officials. Do you think that that's going to repeat itself? There's another international break coming up. You were sort of quite close to that story. You were breaking it for the news outlets in the UK. What was your sort of summary of it? And do you think it's going to happen again?
Well, hopefully there's now time for the next FIFA dates to plan it a little bit better, and to try and get waivers for the players involved before time. Brazil only have one home game, I think, in the next three, which is Uruguay. So it's only the Brazilians and Cavani who are involved. My take on this, I've been here a long time, and I'm sure, like you, Bren, you've had lots of dealings with federal police and so on. And there's a side of Brazilian authority that just despise the perception of the country of being a place where anything goes, where you think you can come here and just do as you please, and that enrages them. And Argentina thought they could get by just with the power of football. They thought they had a deal which would enable them to play these players. The fact that they were coming from the UK meant that deal probably didn't apply, and they gave the health officials a runaround for 2 days, and the health officials just got enraged. So the common sense thing would have been just wait till the end of the game and then sort it all out at the airport and whatever. But I think they were enraged, that the health officials were enraged by the fact that, as one of the directors said, they've been playing cat and mouse with the players for 2 or 3 days. You got to stay in a hotel. You can't go training. They go off training. And then they're waiting for a special waiver for the Brazilian government at the last minute, and it was all too late, so it didn't happen. The same problem exists. I mean, the quarantine requirements in the UK haven't changed, which I imagine means that the quarantine requirements in Brazil theoretically haven't changed. So the same problem remains, but at least I would hope that this time round that there's been some time to plan. But from a Tottenham point of view, I fear you're going to have to go through the same thing again, because I don't think there's going to be a waiver for the players. When I ask people in the UK about this, do you think that football will get a free pass? Everyone says no. public opinion wouldn't stand for a free pass being given to footballers. So they'll be expected to quarantine for 10 days. And there's no way that the clubs are going to accept that. So, the way around it is to let them go for the first 2 games. So they can fly back after the Sunday, and then they've got 10 days in Croatia where they can still train, and then come back and maybe miss 1 game. I can't really, while the current rules are in effect, I can't really see any other way around it.
Yeah, I've just come back myself from, as I said, from the UK via Portugal, and this happened just before I came. So I was thinking, as my reservations were separate, so I sort of technically they could only see that I've been in Portugal. But after this, I'm like, no, I'm right, and I was in the UK for Anvisa. I did loads of PCR tests, and they didn't even check. Like when I flew from Lisbon to Salvador. It's always a nice sort of place to have a little stop and then move on to the UK and vice versa when coming back. And they didn't check. I had my COVID vaccine passport thing. I had the PCR test coming out my arse. Like, not literally. Like that's not how they administer the test. I know, but like it was just so many things, hoops to jump through. They didn't bloody check. I was like, I paid £100 for this. Can someone please check my PCR test? Anyway, there's a wary of time. Shan, do you want to take over? You've been very quiet there, so apologies. Shan, do you want to jump in and ask some questions of our guests?
Yeah, firstly, I just want to say there's 127 of you watching and only 45 likes. Please, whatever you're doing with your hands, hit that like button because it really does help the channel to get viewers in as well. So just to go through some comments. There's so many. Thank you, everyone, for getting involved. There's loads. Go. This is a good one from Bob Spare. Big up, Bob's always here. Love to everyone, not as much as to Tim though. Legend. How long did it take for Brazil to recover from that Germany defeat? Am I right saying it's still hovering around the national team even today?
Yeah, that's a stain on the carpet. It's not going to come out anytime soon. Really, I think this really struck me in the last World Cup because I was over here for the quarterfinals, so and in Brazil. So until Brazil went out. And then I flew back. So I was in England for the semi-finals. So I was in England when England lost to Croatia. And in Brazil, when they went out, just doom and gloom and horribleness, After England lost to Croatia, I went out to the streets and I got the tube and I travelled around and I went back to where my mum lives, which is Hemel Hempstead, where I grew up. And it was still party time, I was really impressed. I think that probably wouldn't be the same now because the expectations on the England team have raised since then, But then I don't think anyone was really expecting it, and so even though we just been beaten in the semi-final of World Cup, people were still out on the streets having a good time, and I was really struck by that. So it's hard for Brazilians to enjoy the World Cup. They suffer it in a way because the World Cup is a bit like heads or tails. There's only 2 results. There's World Cups that they won and World Cups that they lost. I think it's a really depressing way to see the tournament, because you got to enjoy the journey. And it's hard for them to enjoy the journey if the only thing that really makes it worthwhile is if you win at the end. And since they won in 2002, every World Cup has ended as soon as they've met a Western European team in the knockout stages. So that's the bar that they're going to have to get over in order to begin to forget the 7-1.
On that World Cup, I was fortunate enough to go to 3 of the games here in Salvador. And we knock FIFA for all the corruption, and rightly so, but they know how to organize an event. It was so well, like to a T. Everything was great. The fans area. And I went to Germany against Portugal, and Salvador, Tim, as you know, is the sort of African heart of South America. It was the first capital. It was the slave port for the Portuguese, and so it's a big African influence here. And outside the games, there's capoeira, which is like the Baiano, almost martial art dance. It's beautiful when you see them like professionals do it. And the locals were mixing with the fans, the German fans, who are obviously sort of very, very white, and they were doing the capoeira outside the game. And I was just like, wow, this is special. Like it was I'll hold on to those memories forever to have been a part of the World Cup here. So it was, like you said, the pressure is on Brazil to win because of the heightened expectation. But when the World Cup was here, I loved it. I thought it was an incredible tournament. Shan, any other questions before we move on to Jimmy Greaves?
Yep, we've got this one as well. The Brazilian players are coming to Europe far too early and beginning to lose their flair. Would you agree with that, Tim?
No, I think that's a stereotypical view. That no. Where does Kevin De Bruyne come from? Where does Lukaku come from? You know, where is the last Kevin De Bruyne that was produced by Brazilian football? It's a long, long time ago, and that's a dynamic that's happened in Brazil. So no, I think more Brazilians should probably come and look at Kevin De Bruyne and think about playing like him, you know, because that ability that he's got to open up a defence. They still produce quite a lot of dribblers. They produce lots of strikers in wide spaces. But who was the last great midfielder in the real sense of the word?
Are they still playing Douglas Luiz in central midfield, the Brazil national team?
Well, he's lost his place recently, but he lost it to Fred of Man United. You know, who, based on his stats of how much ground he covers and what pace he does it. There's a kind of stereotypical view of Brazilian football being all flair and a kind of carnival in football boots, where everyone's interested in expressing themselves and no one really cares about the result. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's all about winning. It's all about winning. I mean, so many people inside the game have told me that deep down, we like winning much, much more than we like football. One of the things that is amazing, I think, about European football at the moment is the flair players that European football is producing. And English football, I never thought that the English academies would be able to produce the kind of players that they're producing now. No, there's one of the new Maradonas who never quite came off, Diego Latorre, who's now a great pundit in Argentina. He said a few months ago, you know, this generation of English players, Alexander-Arnold and Mount and Foden and Saka and so on, they're like players straight off the street, off the wasteland, off the, you know, and I thought that the European academy system was only going to produce robots. But no, I look and see lots of flair players that Europe is producing. So the idea of Brazil being flair and Europe being just robotic, I think that's a stereotypical view. And you know, who has been one of the most successful Brazilian imports to European to English football? Well, Gilberto Silva at Arsenal. You know, yeah. Look at him. He's like a giant tree. You know, he's like there's not a lot of flair there, but he came in at Arsenal and did a solid job.
Yeah, Tim. One question just on South America. You've obviously been here since '94. Was it that you moved to Brazil? Yeah. What's the best game out here? It sounds quite a basic question, but would it be the Super Classico? Would it, like with the River Plate against Boca? Would it be Fla-Flu in Rio? What would be the best spectacle if and when tourism reopens and someone wants to come here to see football?
Well, for me, it's the international games, because I know for you lot, FIFA dates are just they're a drag, aren't they? They interrupt your rhythm of watching Tottenham or the club side. Over here, the FIFA dates are when all the great players come back. You know, it's a chance to see them. And I've been in the stadium for all the Brazil-Argentina World Cup qualifiers, apart from one. And I wasn't in the stadium for this 5 minutes and 10 seconds, quite happily. The only one I missed was in 2015 when I was in the stadium for it, in Buenos Aires, but there was a torrential downpour and the game got put back a day and I had to travel back. I didn't have any option. I had radio and TV stuff to do. So I missed that one. But there's two, and they're both Brazil versus Argentina, and they're both from the qualifiers in 2006. First one was in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte, when Brazil won 3-1, only because of Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo. And he knew it was the biggest game he was ever going to play in front of a Brazilian audience. And it was in the stadium where he first made his name as a kid. And it was like watching someone from a different species. Argentina played most of football. Brazil won 3-1. He scored all three of them. All three of them were penalties, and all three of them he suffered the fouls for the penalty. And to watch one of the truly great strikers doing it at a moment that was really important for him was just that was breathtaking. It was fantastic. And then a year later, I was in Buenos Aires for the return fixture, where Brazil went ultra attacking, and they didn't bother marking Riquelme, which was suicide. And Riquelme just took them to pieces, and it was 3-0 to Argentina at half time. And then Brazil came back strongly second half, and they got one of those Roberto Carlos free kicks that didn't go into Rose Ed, and when they went into the top corner, they were just wow. It was like a tracer beam, and Brazil pushed back very, very strongly. And in the end, it could have been closer than 3-1. But those games were the greatest players in the world playing in the best football rivalry in the world for World Cup qualification points. So those for me are the highlights. The other highlight, I suppose, is seeing Lionel Messi as a 17-year-old play for Argentina under 20s. At a time when no one had heard of him. He played one friendly for Barcelona, and even Argentina didn't know much about him, but they knew that Spain wanted him, so there must be something there. And he was 17. They didn't give him the number 10 shirt, and he was half as high as everyone else. Everyone else was 19. And you just looked at him, and there's no way. Look at him. Look at him. He looks like a little run to the litter. The kid who didn't turn out right. And then he was just, as soon as the ball was tied to his left foot, and the vision of the game as well, we all knew there we were in the presence of something very, very special. So that was they were wonderful moments for me. That's one of the best things. So the Brazil against Argentina World Cup qualifiers, and the chance to see the next generation right at the start, although that chance is becoming reduced by the thing that I referred to a couple of minutes ago. Europe is now getting them at 18. So, blink and you've missed them. They've already been sold.
Amazing.
I've just got a couple more, Tim, as well. So what do you think of Ndombele, his skill, technique and durability? What are your thoughts on him?
He looks to have it all, doesn't he? I worry about his durability. Does he last to 90? Should he have closed down Kante for the second goal? I worry if he's because there are times when he seems to be the complete package, but I'm still not convinced he can do it over 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's a concern that most of us have. After 60 minutes, he's gone. And then the last one before we move on, obviously, to Jimmy Greaves. Tim, I remember when we first signed Lo Celso, you said on TalkSport you thought he was a good signing for us. Would you still say the same?
Yeah, I think he's a class act. I think he's a top player, really good player, and I don't understand a lot of the bad vibes he gets. I mean, the final that we lost against City a few months back, when we were, I think, as you were saying, Bren, we were awful. He was the only one who offered a threat to the goal, both with a shot that went just wide and a terrific pass that opened up the field. And as I was saying, for over 2 years now, him and Messi are the best thing about Argentina. Why can't we get the best out of him? That's
because we don't have Messi.
Well, yeah, that's part of it. But he's a player who is capable of operating in partnerships. Yeah. Why haven't our coaches been able to do what Tuchel has done with Chelsea and bring out the best in a very talented player?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see the comments that are coming through, Tim, but most Spurs fans are pretty anti Lo Celso.
Yeah, I just think there's a bad vibe that's hanging over the whole place, isn't there? Since the Champions League final, that was a moment maybe when it's a kind of fork in the road moment, isn't it? What are you going to do now? And I understand that there are economic problems. Are you willing to spend the amount of money that you need to spend to compete with nation states? The financing of Man City. So are you going to do that? Or are you, in a way, this is a route that the Arsenal went down, wasn't it? That they moved into the stadium, and the talk was, now we can compete with Man United in terms of stadium capacity. So now, but really, I don't think the people running the club, they're looking at it as a business in a way that owners never used to look at football clubs as a business, as something to turn a serious profit. So, you wonder with the last 15 years of the Arsenal, whether the game has been to do enough to get people to part with their season tickets, and almost like persuade them that you're in with a chance without really making the investments needed to compete with like nation states. And I wonder if Tottenham is in that same path as well. So coming out of the Champions League, the final, what do we do now? Where do we go now? What's the dynamic now? And obviously it was a dynamic that saw us lose Pochettino and then decide on Portuguese pragmatism. And
like having spent a lot of money on those players, on Dombele and Lo Celso, that whatever Pochettino's plan was, we never got to see it, and yes. that's frustrating. Like, because I think I agree with you that Lo Celso is better deeper, but do I trust him in a midfield too? Probably not. Like,
no.
And that's the thing. So you're basically saying if it's a midfield three, he has to be one of those, and that limits.
But I think he could have played where Dele played yesterday.
Okay.
For Argentina, he's on the left of the three, which was what Dele was doing yesterday, and I think he could play there. It annoyed me because I thought Dele was wrong there. I didn't think we were going to get the best out of him there, and I think if you have him there, where he's got more panorama with his left foot, I think there's more possibility of forming a partnership with Kane, for example.
Just
and
on
the way he was bought was it was Daniel Levy, wasn't it? It was
loan and
loan, and then let's wait and see if Eriksen's going to go, and so they weren't 100% committed to that's the player we're going to get in. We're going to get him in. We're going to have him in for pre-season, so we're going to be able to it's a kind of last day of the transfer window. So that was something at the time that made me think, oh yeah. That's what the club's thinking of. It's not thinking, what do we need to do now in order to go back and win the Champions League next time? It's thinking, how can we stabilize the financial ship where because we're not going to be spending the money to compete with nation states. And maybe that's the rational thing to do. I don't know. I don't have the spreadsheets in front of me, and I wouldn't understand them even if I did.
Yeah, just on the Champions League, just quickly, because there was a comment quite a bit further up and I couldn't find it, but there was a rumour that Jan Vertonghen fell out with Pochettino for dropping Lucas Moura for the Champions League final. Do you think that was the beginning of the end for Maurizio Pochettino in that era? Do you think that was the biggest mistake he's made?
Yeah, possibly. It didn't work, did it? Although it's such a hard game to talk about because that horrible handball decision kind of conditioned the whole game, didn't it? I was back in London at the time, and I was watching it in a pub where there was this horrible delay. The sound was like 30 seconds in front of the image. I knew there was a penalty against us before the game had kicked off. And would that game have developed in a different way if it wasn't for that handball? But you would have hoped that the relationship between Pochettino and that team would have been strong enough to overcome one decision that maybe they didn't agree with. I would be more inclined to think that the problem comes afterwards because you've got to move forward, haven't you? There has to be a dynamic, and there wasn't enough of a dynamic, was there, from Tottenham? It was the moment when it seemed to me that the club was happy to accept secondary status.
Yeah, we never really pushed the boat out when it comes to signings, and it's just been the ENIC way. And we've had this debate so many times on the pod, and we will still support the team. We always have to. So we can be frustrated with the owners and their the way they approach the transfer window, I think, is the key frustration, not just in the amount spent, but when we do our business. I think you pointed that out, Tim, with Lo Celso was on the last day of the transfer window. It was a loan, and it's commonplace with Mr. Levy and ENIC, and the hope is with Paratici coming in that our approach will change. So remains to be seen on that front. I'm wary of time, Tim. So I did want to obviously talk about Jimmy Greaves. We sadly lost arguably our greatest ever player on Sunday, or yesterday still. Someone who essentially helped lay the foundations for the club that we are today. He's our record goal scorer, scoring an incredible 266 goals in 379 games for the club, winning 2 FA Cups, the European Cup Winners' Cup, 2 Charity Shields, no leagues, which I found surprising. But
this is, you said lay the foundations, but he comes after the double.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And he replaces Les Allen, and that's a fair step up. Les Allen was a good striker, but in comparison with Jimmy Greaves, he's a journeyman, and that makes that 60s a little bit of a disappointment in a way. The Cup Winners' Cup, I think, is a mighty achievement. It's the first, obviously, it's the first English triumph in European football. But it's not enough, is it? There's 2 FA Cups, but it's not enough. Frustrating, I think. And obviously, it was hard to replace that midfield. Blanche, as he comes, Blanchflower is beginning to get on a little bit. Dave Mackay goes into leg breaks and so on, and there's the tragic loss of John White. And the three of them complement each other so well. And I think Bill Nick struggled year after year after year to try and get the same blend. But when you look at the number of times that the title changed hands over those years, and the fact that we didn't get there, always there or thereabouts. I think maybe one thing that didn't help perhaps was the pitch, because it did used to be a pudding. It was why back then didn't they invest more money in the groundsman? The groundsman was just like a favour job. You give it to an old pro or something like that. But for a club like Tottenham, I remember the pitch when it was just like a mud heap. So that's a little bit disappointing, isn't it? There's no league title. There's the FA Cup is a big deal, and the Cup Winners' Cup is an even bigger deal.
I think
but no more European success as well. It's a bit disappointing that so many goals, and it just didn't quite get us over the line when we were at our strongest.
I think if you go back to 1962, obviously everyone remembers the double, but Greaves' first season was the 61-62 season, and we came close, very close to, well, it's a probably overused word, but immortality, because we won the FA Cup. Yep. We had Benfica in the Champions League semi-finals, and I'm talking because my dad was there, and he tells me about it a lot, that we deserved to win that. We were cheated out of the game, and we actually hit the crossbar in the very last minute. And Benfica were basically the European champions for years before that with Eusebio. And had we beaten Benfica, it was almost a given that we win the final. And we were also competing on the league front, and we only lost the league, I think, by a couple of points to Burnley. So obviously the amount of games that we were playing at that time with new European competition was no one had ever seen that before. That we were cup finalists, we were going for the league, we were going for the Champions League, the European Cup, and we were 2 or 3 games away from a treble, that was completely unprecedented. If you think Greaves is a hero now, just imagine what would have happened if in his first season we scooped the 3 trophies. So that's how close we came. That shouldn't be forgotten.
No, but it makes it all the more disappointing.
Indeed.
That after that, there's the Cup Winners in '63 and the FA Cup in '67. Yeah, there could have been more.
Do you? I mean, you were born in '65, Tim. I've checked your Wikipedia. Do you remember him as playing? Maybe not for Spurs, but later on in the '70s when he was at West Ham.
No, I remember him at Barnet. But I started getting interested in football in '71, and he'd gone then, and he was still around as a kind of cigarette card that he used to collect. You can still get cigarette cards of Jimmy Greaves. I love that. It's one of my favourite phrases that he used to say, that lovely wit of his. Chelsea fans will say I played my best football for Chelsea. Tottenham fans will say I played my best football for Tottenham. And West Ham fans will say I played my best football for Chelsea and Tottenham, which is fantastic line. But one thing that interests me about him at West Ham is that he played a little bit deeper. And according to people who knew him, he started really caring about it, where he'd never really cared that much, or he'd always given the impression of, and his diet, was it was he was the Artful Dodger out of Oliver, wasn't he? Which was kind of late 50s as well. And then suddenly, when it was slipping away at West Ham, he started caring. And one of the grand old men of football is Ron Greenwood, who's West Ham manager, but he was a terrible man manager. Really bad man manager, and the reason I think that West Ham didn't go on after they won the Cup Winners' Cup a couple of years after we did was that the relationship between Ron Greenwood and Bobby Moore just broke down completely, and they really did. I don't think that they liked each other. And when Greaves went into Ron Greenwood to say he was going to retire, I think he really needed, and he said this afterwards, he really needed Greenwood to sit down and say, "Don't do it. You're too good. You've still got a lot to give." Instead of which Greenwood said, "Oh yeah, all right then," and so and maybe that the story of his life would have been a bit different in the 70s had that happened, because maybe he wasn't always the most disciplined of athletes anyway, and that's part of who he was. But you take the discipline away of having to get up and train every day, and that's where the real problems with alcohol started. My strongest memory of him is as a pundit in the '82 World Cup. I don't know if anyone else here is old enough to remember it, because he'd kind of been away from the screens a little bit, and he was on the panel then for the '82 World Cup, and he made his name, and he launched his career in TV on the back of it. Because in the group phase of that World Cup, Italy drew all three of their games. They only qualified on goal difference for the knockout phase, and even then he was saying, "Watch out for Italy. Italy's going to win this thing." And he turned out to be absolutely right. I mean, Italy went on a run there when they beat Argentina, Brazil, Poland, and Germany. And Poland were really strong at the time. It's bang, 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 bang. And Greaves had seen it, even in the group phase, where everyone was right. And he did it with a twinkle in his eye so well that got him back on TV, and he launched a second career. So that's my main memory of him. My old man had lots of memories of him, and my old man lived in Putney for a while and was at a game at Chelsea when he was a kid, and he scored 5. And he used to rave about that. And my old man was a Tottenham fan, nominally, and he was a football fan, really. So he'd seen plenty of Greaves in the 60s. So a bit like your dad said, I grew up on stories of Blanchflower White and Mackay and Jimmy Greaves.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to interrupt as we've got a super chat from Bob. Controversial, Bob, but Tim, what's your view on ENIC as a Spurs fan?
Well, I think we've kind of covered it. I mean, what do they want to do? A few years ago, no one really saw football clubs as a way to make money, did they? I mean, the owners were in it more for prestige than anything else. Now clubs are making money. It's part of the global leisure industry, and you lot are much better qualified to talk about this than I am. But it seems to me that their primary thing they're not doing it because they grew up loving the club or anything like that. It's not, the fella who spent all that money so Blackburn could win the league. It's a business proposition. And as always, on football walks that line. It's a professional football walks that on a tightrope between being business and being culture. We're all in love with it because of the cultural aspect, but I think ENIC are there because of the business aspect. And I wouldn't condemn them from being entirely wrong, but I think we saw there, following on from that Champions League final in 2019, we saw where their real priorities lie.
Yeah, just back onto the Greaves thing, HG. My only memory of Greaves was from Saint and Greavesy on ITV, I think it was, on Saturdays. It was the original sort of football entertainment program before like Soccer AM and Fantasy Football League even. Do you remember that program, HG, the St. Greasy program?
I'm a little bit older than you. I remember it being kind of, football focused time, like 12:30 on a Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah.
I remember it being fun to watch. I don't think at that age I really cared which one was best. The whole Dickie Davis was on afterwards. I mean, it was that kind of era. But like weirdly enough, obviously I'm too young to see Greaves play. My parents weren't massively into Spurs, so I didn't hear the stories. But for whatever reason, I've grown up thinking that my gran used to work for him. There must have been a sports shop or something. So that's been my link to Jimmy Greaves. Oh yeah, my gran, who was a Brentford fan, and I don't know too much. I just remember seeing those shows. I think I've seen the clip of them with Donald Trump doing a Rumbelows Cup draw, or whatever it was.
That's not really representative.
No, it's not, is it?
I think HG, you need to get back in your time machine, and because it was an important show. And I'll explain. I'll try and explain why. Because it was ex-players, and that's the norm now. It really wasn't then. You didn't get ex-players doing stuff like that, fronting it. You had Bob Wilson, who'd come out of. But Wilson was different. He was middle class. He was a qualified teacher, and so on. I mean, he was a little bit of a fish out of water in the football dressing room. The Saint and Greavesy weren't, and that's something that made it at the time revolutionary. So they could be serious, but they did it with a light touch, and they were the pioneers of all of the footballers that you see on TV now. I think that they paved the way for it.
Yeah, Seb, any memories of Greavesy as a broadcaster?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I'd go so far as to say I can distinctly remember my first Spurs game. I grew up in Essex, but all my family were London and Walthamstow, and being at my nan's house before my first ever Spurs game and having St. Greavesy on the telly before we left. I can remember that as part of my first ever Spurs experience, if you like. So yeah, I mean for me. I kind of grew up with him, even though I never got to see him live, because my dad says and still says today, he is the greatest player we have ever produced. And he said there was one way of stopping him, and teams used to know there was one way of stopping him, and that was just not to let him have the ball. Because if he got the ball, it was a goal. It was as simple as that. He's easily England's best ever striker. I know the goal total doesn't match it, but the ratio is off the charts. And I think even on Match of the Day last night, Alan Shearer, who's obviously a fantastic goal scorer himself, he was laughing at some of the stats that were being produced by just how many goals he scored. And he said, and I agree, no one will beat that. The total amount of goals that he scored for England and across all of his clubs, his total top flight goals, has only been beaten by Messi and Ronaldo. And I don't think anyone in this country or English will beat that. It's it's phenomenal. But as a broadcaster, he was just so much fun. I can remember him doing stuff in World Cups and things like that, and he made it fun. He'd send himself up, and what he overcame in his personal life. I think just people just had untold respect for him.
Yep, what a man. Obviously, all of our thoughts are with Jimmy Greaves' family at this time. It was great to see
round the table here, because we're all at different ages. For everyone here, who is your Jimmy Greaves? Like, who is the best or the player who has given you most pleasure in your time watching Tottenham? Like for Seb's dad, it was Jimmy Greaves. For all of you, who would it be? And do you have a favourite team as well?
For me, the team would probably be the 2016-17 team. How that didn't win the league, I'll never know. The player, for me, Sheringham was the first name that came into it. Because I was a kid when Sheringham was playing. And I remember my first game walking up the tunnel, but to the gangway of where the seats are, and seeing him train. I was like, oh my God, there's Teddy Sheringham warm up. And I saw Anderton and Chris Armstrong had massive legs, and I was like, look at the size of his legs. But yeah, so for me, Teddy Sheringham, again, maybe not the stats to back it up, but I just loved him as a player. Shan?
Yeah, for me, I think as a kid it was watching Gareth Bale come through as my favourite player. Obviously, as a kid, he was a left back, and watching him progress into the player he became and still is. I remember last season when he came back. It was I think it was a year on Friday or Saturday that he came back. I remember just sitting there watching Sky Sports all day, just waiting for like Gareth Bale to come back. For me, and I cried when he left. It was horrendous, but yeah, my favourite player is got to be Gareth Bale. And again, my favourite squad has got to be the 16-17 squad. I don't know how we never did anything with that team. I think it's criminal. A lot of the players, especially Hugo, I'd love to see Hugo lift a trophy with Tottenham. I think he deserves it, but how we didn't do it back then is just, I don't know if it was a mentality thing. I don't know if we didn't have quite enough depth to be able to do it, but how we didn't do it was just, I don't know how that happened. And still to this day, the only trophy I've seen us lift is the 2008 League Cup, which is slightly depressing. So,
to be fair, Shan, it's the only one that we can remember. Like 91's a long time ago. 99, I think I was drunk that day. I think my as a kid, I mean, I'm a Harlow boy, so Hoddle was the one that I always grew up around. But I think I always liked Waddle. You know, the late 80s Waddle. The fact that he didn't run like a footballer, didn't play like a footballer, but could beat anyone pretty much wherever he was. I loved that. It was complete antithesis of me as a person and me as a player. But Chris Waddle was my first. You know, the mullet, and I saw him in Harlow Argos once when I was a kid, and I just thought this guy is amazing. Yeah, after that, I always identified with Van der Vaart when he was at Spurs. I just loved how he played the game. I loved that he always scored against Arsenal. It was a fun time to watch Spurs. I think probably my first love was Chris Waddle.
Okay, so I'm a bit odd. My player is Klinsmann. I think I was 14 when he first joined the club, and for me, there was two reasons. A, it was the first time I think I'd really ever been able to kind of brag to friends, you know, that I was a Spurs fan. Most of my friends, I guess, were Arsenal or Man United or Liverpool. But we had a player. We had the player, you know. And the other reason was that when he signed, I was in France with my parents and picked up a newspaper, and on the back there was the picture of Sugar shaking Klinsmann's hands on the yacht. And my dad was furious. Couldn't believe that we bought this cheat, this diver and all this. Like, he's not a Tottenham player. What have we signed him for? And then obviously the very first game against Sheffield Wednesday, and we watched it on Match of the Day, and he scores that goal and he does that dive, and my dad was just suckered straight away, straight in, like completely. So I was able to kind of prove it. My team is the weird one, and I kind of would say the 2016-17 team was very special, but for me, 86-87, because I can remember that. And even though I was only 6-7 years old, for me, I can remember the games in the cup that were on the telly against Wimbledon, against Watford, the final against Coventry. I can remember being just in awe of, as HG said, Waddle, Hoddle, and similar players. And yeah, for me, that's where it all started. So that'll always hold a special place. I've still got programs, annuals, everything in the loft upstairs. And that's where it started for me.
Amazing. Tim, did you say yours?
No, when I was a kid, it was Steve Perryman because he was the youngest. So I kind of identified with him. Later on, I think Gaza. You know, we had him for 3 years. The last two, it was just we were watching like the best player in the world, I think, and you never knew what he was going to do. When he went to the 1990 World Cup, because football wasn't on the box as much, the rest of the country didn't really know him as you would know a player today. So in a way, he was like our little secret, and we all knew that he was going to be a sensation in the World Cup. And then the year afterwards, when we ended up winning the cup. And that was just an epic year, so, and just the sense of fun that he brought. So yeah, between Steve Perryman and Gazza, I love Ozzy as well. Team, I've got a thing for the 72. That's the first season that I followed all the way through. The 72 side that won the UEFA Cup. I always hated the fact
glory game. The glory.
I always hated the fact it was against Wolves. It kind of took something away from it that it was against another English team. The semi-final was against Milan. That was more glamorous than playing Wolverhampton in the final. That took some of the gloss away from it for me. But there you go. Like Seb, 86, 87. I loved 86, 87. I drifted out of football for a while. And, I went now and again, but it wasn't. Music was much, much more important to me. And the 86 World Cup got me back. And 86, 87 was an extension of World Cup. Pleat was the coach, and he was playing. It was based on what France had done in that World Cup, 4-5-1. It was all revolutionary at the time, with Clive Allen up front on his own and Chrissy Wadd making the bullets for him to fire. And in glorious Tottenham tradition, we're in contention for everything and ended up winning nothing. So, 91, for all the reasons that we mentioned earlier. And I've also got a thing for that team suddenly in the early months of 93. I don't know if anyone remembers this. Because we were a little bit cut price and it was struggling a little bit. And then suddenly, Nicky Barmby got in the team and he was sensational. And Barmby, Darren Anderton and Sheringham together. And there was a new kid every week. It was Danny Hill. He was going to be great. And then Kevin Watson and then Andy Turner and Sol Campbell. Don't know whatever happened to him.
Oh.
And then it was that, wow, it's really going places. And then that ended with the Sugar Venables row. So they're my teams, and I suppose the Pochettino team as well, because in all the time that I've been away, it's the one that I felt closest to. But hopefully the best players and the best teams are the ones still to come. Why not?
Exactly. It's the hope. That's all we have. It's what we have. It's what we love. It's the hope
that kills us, Bren. The hope that kills us 100%.
Well, Tim, before we go, just want to obviously let the viewers and our listeners, because this will go out as a podcast as well, about the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. I'm a huge fan. The last one you had was with the West Ham journo, who was very West Ham, but he was likeable.
A little bit like Henry's cat, doesn't he, Sam? there's a kind of monotone there, especially when he's getting into rant about what happened with Sheffield United. That was fun.
It was a great episode. Do you want to tell the viewers about the podcast? I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, what we do is we choose one game from history, and we talk about the game. Me and Dotun Adebayo, with whom I'm about to spend 3 hours on the air tonight on Radio 5. So we pick a game from history, and we talk around the game, and we talk around what's happening culturally as well, especially music. And mainly, it's a chance for me to rant about all the music that I don't like. Really. So we'll have a quick thing about the football. We'll have a half hour on the football, and then we'll argue about music. It's the low point in my friendship with Dotun is when I found out he likes "I Love Rock and Roll" by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. And what's the matter with you, man? So that's what we do. We cover all human life is here and a few other things besides. This week we're going to be doing the Cup Winners' Cup final from '63. So that's the game we're going to be looking at. I think it's the high point of Jimmy Greaves' career. It's the big title that he gets, and it's the first title from an English team. So first European title from an English team. So it's a hugely significant moment on a mud heap in Rotterdam, which clearly gave Tottenham an advantage. Anyone who's played at White Hart Lane, knows all about playing in mud heaps, and maybe Atletico Madrid didn't. But that's the game we're going to do, and it's kind of the start of Beatlemania as well. The Profumo scandal, so sex has just been invented. So we'll have some fun with it.
Fantastic. Well, anything else to add, guys, before we wrap up?
There's a fantastic prize on Football Prizes this week. I don't know if you've seen. There's a signed pennant by 11 of the 1984 UEFA Cup winning team. So you've also got Birkinshaw on there, Ardiez. The names kind of passed me by now. I did notice Ali Dick was on there. She's always a winner. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. That will be drawn next Monday. But yeah, worth a mention. So it's a really impressive looking prize.
Brilliant. Cheers. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a superb chat. We've loved every minute, and we look forward to the next one.
Cheers. And well, I'm relying on you lot to keep me informed. You know, I'm a long way away, and Brendan, we're gonna be a long way away for a long time. So I'm relying on you lot.
Yeah, we will. And do listen out for the Brazilian Shan podcast. You get it wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast, it's there, as is the Cheese Room. And so, guys, Shan, when's the next YouTube vid coming out?
So we are back on Wednesday at 7:30 for the Wolves watch along. I mean, whenever I do them, they end up being an absolute disaster because we play horrendous. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah,
Shan, if we were playing well, then people wouldn't be watching along. They'd be watching the game. So it's someone to talk to while the game is being terrible. It's a good selling point, right?
Yeah, if you say so, HD. I mean, for me, it's like torture because I'm just sat there and everyone's just watching my emotion unfold. The Palace one done me. That was not a good start. But yeah, we'll be back for myself and Caller for 3 hours. God help me. Doing the Wolves watch along. So if you're sort of a bit scared to watch, but you want to listen to what's going on and hear me and Caller probably argue for 3 hours, then the Cheese Room's the place to be.
Excellent, guys. Make sure you do give it a like. This video a like. I'm not the best sort of YouTube host. I'm usually used to the pods, so please do give this a like if you're watching this afterwards. We will publish this as a pod, so do listen out for it. And yes, as ever, come on, you Spurs!
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 There we go. That's what we love to hear.